All right. Today, we're jumping into a really mind-bending idea from the philosopher Michel Foucault. And trust me, this one will challenge pretty much everything you think you know about facts, truth, and knowledge itself. So if you've ever found yourself wondering who really gets to decide what's true, you are in exactly the right place.
Okay, so let's dive in. Most of us, right, we grow up with this very simple story about knowledge. We think of it as something that's just out there, waiting to be found. Like some kind of hidden treasure. But Foucault, he comes along and throws a massive wrench in that whole idea. He says knowledge isn't discovered at all. It's produced.
You know the story I'm talking about? The lone genius myth. We love to picture these incredible minds, people like Einstein or Pasteur, as these unique figures who just rose above their time and grabbed a hold of some pure, objective truth. But Foucault wanted to completely flip that script.
He asked this totally game-changing question. He said, what if we stop focusing on who is thinking the thoughts and start looking at the systems themselves? The rules, the institutions, the frameworks that make it even possible for certain ideas to be considered true in a given time and place.
And this brings us to this amazing idea of a knowledge machine. See, Foucault wasn't really interested in the famous thinkers. He was way more fascinated by the big, anonymous, institutional system, the machine that churns out what our society decides to call facts and knowledge.
So, and this is a really crucial point, he wasn't writing a history of ideas. He was doing what he called an archaeology. He was digging into the material conditions of thought, all the background stuff that makes it possible to think certain thoughts, while other ideas just remain, well, unthinkable.
You can almost think of it like this. In any era, there's a set of unspoken rules about what counts as a serious statement. Then you have institutions like universities, hospitals, governments that act like bouncers, enforcing those rules. This whole process lets certain ideas get the VIP pass to become facts, while other ideas get kicked to the curb, totally discredited and left out of the conversation.
And this whole process of deciding what's in and what's out, well, that brings us to Foucault's most famous, and let's be honest, his most difficult concept. This unbreakable, intense link between power and knowledge.
So first off, we have to kind of reboot our whole idea of power. It's not just a king on a throne yelling, no. For power to actually work, to manage a population, to classify people, to govern, it needs information. It's actually a productive force that needs tons of data just to organize reality. And then here's the flip side, the big twist. The very act of going out and gathering that information, of deciding who to study, how to label them, what questions you're even allowed to ask, that right there is a massive exercise of power. When you produce knowledge, you are making a claim for power. This is where it all comes together. Foucault saw these two things as so tangled up that he literally just smashed the words together into this one term, power/knowledge. They're not two separate things that bump into each other sometimes, no way. They're two sides of the exact same coin. They create each other, they feed each other constantly. So the bottom line is this. It's a two-way street. It's a feedback loop. Power can't do its thing without a body of knowledge to work on. And every time new knowledge is created, it just creates and reinforces the very structures of power that made it possible. Okay, I get it. This can feel super abstract, kind of floating in the philosophical clouds. So let's ground this. Let's look at some really concrete, real-world examples to see how this power/knowledge thing actually shapes the world we live in. Just take a second and think about this. When you hear about academic studies, in fields like sociology or anthropology, have you ever noticed a pattern in who is always the one under the microscope? Historically, if you look back, there is a mountain of knowledge produced about marginalized groups. Countless studies on women, but way fewer on men. Tons on the working classes, but not so many on the middle classes. For Foucault, this isn't some neutral accident. It's a direct result of power imbalances, and producing all this knowledge actually helps keep those imbalances in place. Colonialism is the textbook example of power/knowledge in action. To control these vast territories and all the people in them, the colonial powers needed to know them. This kicked off this huge industry of information gathering, making detailed maps, writing dictionaries for local languages, describing every single custom. But, and this is so important, this was not some neutral search for truth. Take a Western botanist, for example. He arrives, classifies a plant using the European system, and gives it a Latin name. But in doing that, he is completely ignoring and basically erasing the local way of classifying that plant, which might have been based on its use in medicine or sacred rituals. Western knowledge called itself universal, but it was absolutely an act of power.
And hey, this isn't just something from the past. It shapes the facts we consume every single day. We see an image from a war zone on the news, and we think we're getting a raw, unfiltered look at reality. But so often, what we're actually seeing is the final product of a heavily managed negotiation where journalists are given very limited access by military forces, which directly shapes the truth that we're allowed to see.
So, what do we do with all this? What's the big takeaway here? And why on earth does this philosophical idea matter so much today, in a world where we're just drowning in information?
This quote gets right to the core of Foucault's most stunning argument. He's saying it is not the brilliant individual who dreams up new knowledge. It is the underlying web of power knowledge that actually determines what can even be known or said at all. The individual thinker is really just the vehicle that this knowledge speaks through.
Now look, the point here is not to become a total cynic who just believes nothing is true. Not at all. The point is to become a more critical thinker. It's about realizing that knowledge is never totally pure or objective. We have to understand that it's always created inside of, and usually in the service of, a particular system of power.
So Foucault's work really gives us this powerful new lens to look at our world. And it leaves us with this one last really important question to think about. What is one truth in your life, something you've always just accepted as a simple fact, that might actually be the product of a hidden history of power? It's something to chew on.